Welcome to Sunday at the Segal for today, Sunday, January 23rd. I'm your host and moderator, Sarah Deshaies, wishing you a very happy 2022. I hope you had a restful, safe, and joyous holiday period. I have my orange juice here with me. I've got some tiropita pastry. It's not rugelach at the Segal Center, but a treat all the same. So I hope you have a coffee or whatever it is you need and to join us here for the next hour. As Rio commented on our YouTube stream earlier this hour, I miss going to the Segal. So do I, Rio. But this is as best as it can be right now. Today, we are exploring Jewish identity and storytelling to complement the upcoming debut of YidLife Crisis, Pandemish, coming to your home later this week. The Segal Center is situated on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people. The land was also a diplomatic meeting place with other Iroquoian and Algonquin groups, including the Algonquin Anishinaabe, Atikamekw, and Huron-Wendat. We acknowledge that we are located on a land that has been the site of human creativity and storytelling for thousands of years, and are thankful that we are able to create, collaborate, play, and work here in Tiohtià:ke, Muniang, also known as Montreal. Eli Batalion and Jamie Elman are two nice Jewish boys from Montreal. Their childhood included learning Yiddish at Jewish day school, seeing shows at the Segal Center. And those two boy chicks have since grown into professional artists who in the past few years have become semi-famous for making jokes on the internet in Yiddish. The first ever episode of their web series, YidLife Crisis, introduces us to friends Laser and Jaime, meeting up at an iconic poutine restaurant, La Banquise, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. While Laser has just come from praying at shul, Jaime is tucking into a poutine. They kibitz about food, lactate pills, and how to eat poutine kosher style. You probably hit play on one of their many videos. There have been over 3 million views on their YouTube page to date, and their Yiddish language shtick has catapulted Ellie and Jamie around the world. They have performed comedy live, they've made a feature documentary, won awards, and collaborated with big names like comedian Howie Mandel. But behind all the jokes and the shots of smoked meat sandwiches, Jamie and Ellie's goal was always to pay homage to the Yiddishkeit and Jewish comedy that influenced their upbringing. And like the nice boys they are, they never forgot where they came from. So last year, they filmed a pandemic-themed show, a pep talk of sorts, for the virtual Segal Center audience. And the guys were preparing to perform live this winter on stage until you know what happened. You'll get a chance to view their new creation, YidLife Crisis Pandemish, online later this week. It's a love letter to their hometown and community. And so for today's Sunday at the Segal, we're drawing inspiration from Ellie and Jamie's love of Jewish culture, meaning, and comedy, and their not-so-secret mission to introduce a digital generation into the world of Jewish storytelling while making people of all ages and beliefs laugh along the way. And I have to say that as an aside, as your moderator today, I'm very excited to dig into this topic because it feels full circle. My first time hosting Sunday at the Segal a few years back was for My Name is Asher Lev by Chaim Potok, where we talked about Judaism and what it is to be a Jewish creative. It was actually at the Segal, and we had a power outage just before the start. The lights were back on in times for the show, but we actually did it outside in the big open space outside the theater. 4 talented artists have agreed to speak with us today about their craft and how Jewish identity plays a role in their work. Our panelists have all developed projects through the Segal's Jewish Arts Mentorship Program or the Museum of Jewish Montreal's microgrants for creative and cultural exploration. Let us finally meet our panelists. Daph Ben David is a genderqueer educator, activist, stage manager, soon-to-be rabbinical student, and a proud Montrealer. They have taught social justice to Jewish teens, have worked in public schools, and led community workshops on topics ranging from anti-pipeline activism to transness in the Torah. Lately, Daph has been focusing on bridging their activism and healing work with Jewish practice. You can follow their most recent project on SoundCloud, where they are reweaving relationships with their Arab Jewish ancestors through liturgy as a queer and trans person in the diaspora. And we're reaching them on the West Coast, where it's nice, bright, and early. Thank you, Daph, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
J-Rob, aka Half White Full Black, is a Black Ashkenazi Jewish multidisciplinary artist and activist from Montreal with roots in St. Vincent and Germany. His two primary focuses are music and poetry, with the aim of amplifying and uniting the voices of the marginalized to dismantle white supremacy and the systems that uphold it. J-Rob is currently working on an experimental hip-hop album and a poetry collection, and is also vice president of the executive board for the revitalized effort to reclaim and rebuild the NCC, a prominent Black community center that once operated in Little Burgundy. And we are reaching him in Montreal today. Welcome.
Hey, how y'all doing? Glad to
Yael
be here.
Silver is a Tony Award-winning and Tony-nominated multidisciplinary entertainment producer. She has spent the majority of her career working at the intersection of art and social justice and excels in partnering those two worlds in live and digital events, benefit concerts, live streams, and working with high-profile clients. Yael is a visual effects producer and a proud advisory board member of Headcount, which is an American nonprofit that encourages democratic participation through music. Yael was part of the 2019-2020 Jewish Artist Mentorship Cohort at the Segal, and she's joining us in Montreal today. Welcome, Yael.
Great to be here. Thank you, Sarah.
And finally, we have Herschel Blatt, an actor and writer based in Toronto. He has worked between stage and screen with acting credits that include My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2, What Would Sal Do, which is absolutely hilarious, Wedding Season, and The Boys. He was part of the 2021 cohort of the Segal's Jewish Arts Mentorship Program and is developing his play Ahava Later with Winnipeg Jewish Theater. Herschel is a graduate of Etobicoke School of the Arts and Sheridan U of T Theater and Drama Studies program. Joining us from Toronto, welcome, Herschel.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for being here. So for you watching in at home, we will begin our discussion here. Please put any comments, any thoughts, any questions you might have in the chat. We're going to fold them in throughout, and we're going to go through questions, especially towards the end. We would love to hear from you, whether it's a question or just a comment. So we've heard so much about all four of you, your work and your projects, but we'd like to know, how would you actually describe your relationship to Judaism and the community? Are you observant, practicing, secular? Who would like to go first? J-Rob, would you like to start?
Sure. I was thinking about my answer, but I guess I'd go as far as say that I'm a secular Jew. I definitely identify culturally with Judaism, but I wouldn't say I'm the most religious person. But yeah, I'm a descendant of people from Germany, Jews from Germany. So it's always been, I guess, a central part of our conversation and identity. And yeah, I guess I aim to carry on that tradition. So that's me.
How about we go to Herschel next?
Yeah. How do I identify? I grew up in a pretty traditional-ish household as far as religiosity. In that sense, I probably identify as more Reform now, if anything. I'm not irreligious, but I'm not, I definitely have made my relationship to Judaism my own. And I think it's complex, but I'm probably a Reformed Jew who does things in my own way and is kind of curious and always evolving what my relationship to religion and my identity is. But it's an important part of who I am as an artist and what I think about day to day. But in my own way, yeah.
Thank you. Yael, how about yourself? We'll pick you next.
So I was born in Israel. So for me, Judaism is just very much ingrained in how I grew up, but I would have to say that I'm culturally Jewish, not religious in any way. In my family, we were very secular. We just celebrated the holidays. We have family Shabbat dinners, but it's about being together as a family and not so much about the religion of it. It's hard to take away, what is to divide for me. It's what is Jewish and what is Israeli, and the way that I grew up, it's just very much ingrained in me. Yeah, it's a complicated relationship. That's what I'm saying.
This may be the hardest question of the whole hour, you guys. Daph,
Okay,
we'll turn to
great.
you next.
Yeah. I grew up in a family that was like half Orthodox and half secular, and so I've kind of throughout my life like bounced between both of them. And I think at this point, I consider myself an observant Jew, kind of playing with this idea of queer Orthodoxy, actually, which we could maybe talk about later. But yeah, I consider myself a practicing observant Jew at this moment.
Thank you, Daph. So my next question is, what does it mean to be a Jewish artist? Does it even mean anything? And you can say no, that's totally fine. I don't know if anybody wants to tackle this one first. Because I kind of picked you guys out last time around. Okay. Herschel, why don't we go with you next?
You know what? Just on the last question quickly, I'm going to say, like, I connect to what Daph and Yael are saying. So this idea of like just two, like, I also come from one very religious side of my family and one that's more secular / reform. So balancing that identity is something that even as an adult, I'm still grappling with. And then also I'm from Bathurst and Lawrence in Toronto, which, like, you go to Israel, you go to Montreal and you say Bathurst and Lawrence, they're like, oh yeah, Toronto, I know Bathurst and Lawrence. So it's also part of kind of like my acculturation into the world, like my Jewish religion and identity. So it's also complex to kind of parse out what is culture and religion sometimes, because it's confusing to me. So just, yeah, I get that. But okay, so Jewish artist, what it means to be a Jewish artist. I don't know. I think it's something that I'm still curious and grappling with. I think there is a lot of responsibility that I feel personally, just, to represent what that means and sometimes come up with the right questions or answers about that. I think, again, like, being Jewish is such a broad thing, and there's so many different identities and ethnicities and kind of complex relationships with that. So I'm grappling, for me, what it means to be like a Jewish artist, a queer artist, an artist that's practicing in Toronto, what it means to be a young person in my 20s still figuring out this stuff. And yeah, it's an ever evolving question for me, but I think I do feel a responsibility to kind of share some things that I can grapple with. And I don't know, like, I'm also like a grandkid of like Holocaust survivors, and there's this kind of responsibility sometimes I feel like to explore what that even means and what that looks like today and what that relationship is like in my friend circles and things like that. So these are things I think about in my writing, but I don't know if that's anything close to an answer. Yeah.
Incredibly satisfying as an answer. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of nodding on the panel. So I'm wondering if there's any themes that are kind of speaking to the idea of like it's an evolving journey and kind of parsing out what is what you were raised with and what do you want to do with your career. Yael, would you like to follow up with what does that mean to be a Jewish artist and whether it even, means anything?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely nodding a lot when you were speaking, Rachel. I mean, yeah, for me, it's like I can't separate the fact that I'm Jewish and Israeli from my identity, right? It's like my name speaks for itself, right? Like I walk into a room and I'm introducing myself, and people are like, "What is your name?" And I didn't experience that until I moved to North America. I moved here when I was a kid, and then I moved back to Israel, and I'm a human yo-yo, but it's very much like the first thing is my name, right? Yael. People can't say that. So as an artist, it's always been like, I am very proud of being Jewish. It is something that is, Hebrew is my first language. It's an honor for me to be able to live as an open Jew, right? And it's a privilege. But it's hard for me, and I don't know if this is the right time to go into it, but it's like the difference between being a proud Jew and also being proud of everything that Israel does, because I am not, right? And it's like, and it's this dissonance that happens for me as an artist, as a human. So it's a fine line. But I agree that, like, yeah, there's Herschel. I was nodding, and I'll keep nodding.
We can untangle some of that as we move along. J-Rob, tell us, what does that mean for you to be a Jewish artist?
Yeah, a lot of my art is very political. Offers a lot of like political and socio-political commentary, and my Jewish identity plays a large role in my worldview and how I see the world, how I interpret the world, and how the world interprets me. I think I grew up in a suburb that at my high school, me and my brothers were the only Jewish people in their school. So it's both been a point of anxiety for me and a point of pride, because it's like, wow, we have this wild story, the more and more I learn about like Jewish history, it's like, holy, like we had so many opportunities where we could have just been wiped off the map, but we're descendants of people that survived, people that chose not to abandon their faith, and people who chose not to abandon their identity. And to me, it's like that fills me with such like, pride, I guess, is the word for it. I'm just like, for them who had to struggle to get where they are today, I owe it to be like the most loud and proud as I can be. So I found the largest Star of David that I can find, and I wear it every day. And I also offer aside from my music and poetry, I do live streams where I sometimes offer political takes. And the unfortunate reality is there is a growing voices that are incredibly anti-Semitic. So I feel it's my place to call it out when I see it. And my goal, I guess, in my artistry and just in my being is to be a place, be a person that Jews and all people can feel comfortable around. And that's why I do what I do, I guess.
Thank you, J-Rob. And Daph, the final person to answer the question of what it means to be a Jewish artist. You were talking a bit about growing up in kind of like a secular side of your family and a more Orthodox side of your family. So you must have an interesting experience on your artistic journey and also with identity. Tell us more.
Yeah, I'm just also really appreciating everyone on this panel and what they're sharing. Yeah, I kind of love that there's like no answer and any and all possible answers.
Yeah.
It feels like deeply Jewish in that it holds like so much multitudes and complexity. I feel really honored to have been invited to this panel because I feel like so new to my artistic practice in my life. The Museum of Jewish Montreal grant was one of my first kind of supported and like more public artistic work. And so I'm just like, oh, do I even know? But it feels like for me being a Jewish artist, it's just my work stems from my ancestors and my lineages. And I think like if you consider yourself a Jewish artist, like if that lineage is important to you, that identity, you're working from that place or not, like you get to decide for yourself if that's something that you feel like informs your work, then it does, and it doesn't have to look in any particular way. But I would say for me, all that I'm grappling with is a lot like around ancestry and practice and tradition and what does that mean? Kind of like what J-Rob was saying, like what does it mean to like steward this tradition? What does it mean to hold it and work with it in my own way and pass it on, and all those questions I feel like, and a lot of like grief work as well, I find comes up when I, in my work. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you so much, Daph. You mentioned the Museum of Jewish Montreal being a micro-grantee, J-Rob yourself, and we're working with the museum. Herschel and Yael having come through the Segal Center's Jewish Artist Mentorship Program. I did want to take some time to talk about community support for Jewish artists, whether there's do we have a good system in place? Could we be doing more? How has that is there a specific example, maybe the programs you just mentioned or another mentorship or something that kind of pushed you along in your career? Yeah, tell me about your experience with the mentorship program at the Segal.
Well, I am a huge fan. I had just moved to Montreal when I received that opportunity, and it changed my experience of integrating into Montreal society. I moved here to be with my family, but I didn't know anybody other than my sister, brother, and my parents. So it was really special and a welcoming environment, and challenged me and made me grow. I came from New York at that time, so I'd had my community there, but in Montreal, it was such a soft landing and such a welcoming experience. And Caitlin and Sivan and the other fellows that were with me, it was Roger and Aaron. If you guys are watching this, I adore you and I miss you. But it was just incredible. So I can't imagine my life in Montreal without that.
I love that expression, soft landing, for your time moving here and having that support system. Herschel, did you have a similar experience?
I had a great experience, but it was so different because it was at the height of, well, at this point, what's the height of the pandemic? It's like wave 2, wave 3, wave 4. It was like, the winter of 2021, where everything was virtual, as it is ish in a sense now. But it was, a really dark time during the pandemic, and it was really beautiful for me to be able to like gather with other artists. And I'm from Toronto, and I have family in Montreal, and I grew up going to Montreal and all that. But because of the virtual element of the program, I was able to, do the program from Toronto and really, experience these awesome Montreal artists who are, working and collaborating within the city and, figuring out what that work means to them and the kind of things they're doing. And it just felt really supported. And I was able to really ask questions and learn and gain access to resources, which can be a really tough thing as a young artist, connecting with people. So for me, that was just like awesome to be able to have like Sivan as a resource and be like, hey, can you connect me with this person? And I'm looking to interview this person for my work. I was interviewing a lot of queer Jewish seniors, and, having someone on the ground in Montreal who had those connections, and hey, Sivan, who had those connections was awesome, because I felt that I could actually like do the work and, keep going with my ideas and what I was trying to do, because I felt supported. So I think just that mentoring of the next generation in these like Jewish arts institutions is so incredibly important if you want a future and you want to actually like ask questions of what people are doing now and things that, artists are interested in that maybe haven't been part of the mainstream in previous generations. So I think it's incredibly important.
Thanks, Herschel. And you kind of touched on something that it can be really hard to forge a career in the arts. We know this. It gets often repeated when you tell people what you do, like, well, good luck with that. So having like these kinds of supports in place, I'm curious, Daph, J-Rob, both having done work with the Museum of Jewish Montreal, did you find these opportunities or other opportunities were a way to also kind of, Daph, you were saying you're at the beginning of your artistic process. J-Rob, you're working on an album and a book of poetry. Is the Jewish community offering enough opportunities for artists to get on the ground for this kind of, intangible career option?
J-Rob, do you wanna go for it?
You could go if you got something. Feel free.
Well, I think I was surprised that the Museum of Jewish Montreal grant existed and that I was accepted into it. And I mean, it was amazing. It was such an amazing opportunity. But I think I did, have kind of an expectation in the community that, maybe like marginalized perspectives might not get that much support. I think and I grew up here. I feel like I knew the community pretty well, but I would say, I think I had like some expectations like institutionally, after coming out, and then I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't like my place so much anymore. And the Museum of Jewish Montreal was like, no, that's not true. Like, we got you if you want to do this work with us. And it was really incredible. It was really incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
J. Rob, how about yourself?
I could definitely ditto that statement. Yeah, when they reached out to me, like I guess like I at the time I didn't necessarily consider myself like a Jewish artist. I was rather a Jew. I was making art. To get that recognition and have them like, hey, come apply for this. It was just like, it was pretty wild to me, because I feel like for me, a lot of my life has been, searching for that, outside validation for my Jewishness, because, I'm the only Black Jew I know. I don't know Drake personally. I'm sure he's a great guy. Maybe he's had the same struggle, but for me, it was always like, well, am I Jewish? I don't look like any of the Jews I know. And, I didn't feel Jewish a lot of times. But as I grew up, I started to recognize, well, I don't think there's really any way for anybody else besides myself to either confirm or to validate or deny my Jewishness. It's really, up to me. And once I started doing that, and then, had the Montreal Jewish Museum reach out to me, I was like, oh wow, like, this is what I've been trying to do. At this point, I'm me, and I'm the most me I can be. So yeah, it was really dope. It was really, really much needed experience for me.
Oh, so wonderfully put. So Judaism is a broad umbrella term. Like, there's so much that we can pull from it. And I'm curious to know if there's like language, folk tales, or is it comedy? Like, what inspires you in the work that you're doing now, or the work you've done in the past, or something you might want to do in the future? What electrifies you that, could fall under that broad umbrella term?
Mm-hmm. Do you mind repeating the first half of the question?
Absolutely.
Sorry. Yeah.
So, we were kind of wrestling with this idea of what it means to be a Jewish artist, right? Like, what could that possibly mean? And the more I was thinking about this discussion, I was kind of like, well, putting identity and who we are aside, obviously, as artists, that's identity is very important. But I was curious to know if there were elements from Judaism, whether it's culture or religion, or, talking about food, or is it the language, the history, even folk tales? Have any of those elements proved to be an inspiration for you and stuff that you've done in the past, something you're working on now, or something you're going to work on in the future?
For me, I hope nobody else minds if I jump in on this one. But for me, I've recently learned about our views on the afterlife, or rather, our lack of views on the afterlife. It's not really confirmed what happens next. And my understanding of all, I guess, mainstream religions is that, it's very much centered around that. It's like, you do good now, so something good happens to you after you die. But the idea that, something might happen, something might not. So, like you got to make the best out of what you can do here and now, because this might be it. What I'm saying? That to me was really like a centering idea. It's like, and the idea, like, I also read up about like purgatory, and it's like, yeah, like, even like the idea that even if there is a heaven, well, everybody gets there eventually. We just have to, atone and recognize the harm that we've done, and blah, blah, blah. And then you're let in. And it's like, that's wild. It's like, because so much of our, our life right now, our in the real world is, centered around punishment. It's like you do wrong, you're punished, and you're kind of exiled for a long time. I know a lot of people that's been to jail, and their life has changed drastically, and they can never really come back into the real world again, because their life has been affected by a misdoing that they've done in the past. And the idea that eventually we all are going to be, either nothing happens or something happens, but whoever that something is, we're all going to be there. I don't know, that's cool to me. It's like the idea of like it's really informed my politics around like restorative justice and working together as a community to if someone does something wrong, we consider the entire situation and what's happening around them, rather than, oh, he did this wrong and we gotta punish it. I don't know, that's always been like a cool thing for me, and it's something I continue to read up on more and stuff.
That is so fascinating. I did not have the afterlife and the question of what lies beyond on my bingo card, but I'm going to look for that in your work. Herschel, you're actually working on a play right now with the Winnipeg Jewish Theater, Ahava Later. Is that something you might want to talk to us about?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's something that I've been working on for like 5-ish years. I started working on it in university as like this one-act show, and it's this play set in the 1960s in this working class Jewish family. A lot of it is drawn from the experience of when a lot of my family came to Canada, kind of post Holocaust, post World War II, and it centers around their queer son and his story within that period, and kind of, with these young parents who are all kind of coming of age in their own way, as a lot of, our grandparents and people of previous generations did, when you're kind of this maybe 30-something-year-old person raising a teenager, and kind of your life is still happening, and, you're growing in your own way. And it's just so pretty. It's this coming of age story that kind of centers around queerness in this time, that has been really important to me. And it's something that I'm workshopping with Winnipeg Jewish Theater, and still kind of developing. And I think it merges a lot of my interests, just going back to the last question, I guess, with like time and looking back at our ancestors and grandparents and these people who have come before us, and kind of investigating some of these stories that we think are new in this period, but they're really not. Like, when I was in university, I started watching Transparent, and the second season of Joey Soloway's writing and development, when they go back to the grandparents' family in Berlin, and they see this kind of queer mecca of people, and these people were the first ones who were destroyed during the war. And we realize like this history of queerness and this idea of like non-normativity, it's all exists before us. And I think when we look back, we see these people have always been here. And I think just investigating the past can connect us to like where we want to go in the future, because these people have always been here, and it's just like, it's not new. And I think that's like the biggest takeaway when you speak to your grandparents who are still alive, or great grandparents, or just older generations. They have so much to share that we don't assume that they do. And for me, just being able to look back at a few generations before I was born and seeing what that means and looks like has been a really cool experience, because a lot of these people aren't going to be here forever. So just interviewing these people and speaking to them to gain more knowledge has been really beautiful and insightful. Yeah.
So mining history and talking to our ancestors is a rich source of inspiration for you. Yael, can I turn the mic over to you? What part of Judaism serves as an inspiration for your work?
I just have to say that it's such an honor to be on this panel. Like, y'all are amazing. It's interesting, but I didn't realize that this was what drove me, but I feel that I take a lot of inspiration from Tikkun Olam, right? From healing the world, because my work has been so heavily influenced in like at the intersection of art and social justice, right? Like, how do I use art, the medium that I know best, that I grew up in, that I love so dearly, and how do I use that to try to heal the world? Whether it be advocating for gender equality, for LGBTQ plus rights. My brother and my mother are both members of the LGBTQ community. So it hits home, literally. And, voting rights in the States, abortion access. These are things that are important to me. Gun violence prevention, that is a big thing that I worked on in the States. And it is all about tikkun olam. So I can't separate the fact that I'm so Jewish, like, even though I'm not a religious Jew, I am using the values that we have in Judaism and using that towards the way that I view my life and also the way that I view my work.
Thank you so much. Daph, you'll be the last one to answer the question, I guess, of what elements of Judaism inspires you as an artist.
Yeah, Herschel, I just have to say, I'm just thinking about, I've seen Transparent too, and just thinking about those scenes from Berlin, like I like wept watching those scenes. They are so incredible. And I think, that's a lot of what comes up for me when I do my work too, like the incredible amount of loss that there is. And I think like when I feel really connected to text study, like Jewish, like sacred text study. It's also like in my lineages, and I find when I dig for liberatory ideas, like definitely restorative justice is, there's a lot of that in the Talmud. There's so much about non-binariness, about liminality, transness, different genders, intersex identities. Like there's so much in there, and I look at this, I'm like, why didn't I know? Why don't we talk about these things? And just really feeling like actually how central all these ideas are to our tradition. I'm like, oh wow, this is all in here. And so I find I'm really, really inspired lately with, I'm really like kind of fixated on liminality and that ability to hold like multiplicity and in between space. I find it's really healing. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that a recent discovery for you? Because you're so energized by that. This is something you've just started kind of delving into?
Yeah, I would say over the past like couple years, but it's also it was in the pandemic too, so it kind of takes on this like other time level, I feel, because we were also doing the Museum of Jewish Montreal projects during the pandemic, and a lot of this, just having different amount of time, I think, and being in a different headspace, connecting with folks online and in different places all over the world. Like I see like a lot of queer Jews coming to Jewish tradition, being like, oh, I'm actually in here. This is mine too. And so I do, the past, I think I would say 2 years, like wrestling with this with other people have been extremely energizing. Yeah.
Thank you to Richard, who's joining us on Facebook, who comments, thank you for sharing your stories. That applies to all four of you. It's been so interesting so far. I'd like to take a different tact here and bring up something that's been more a hot button issue, kind of been popping up the last couple of months. And that's the idea of authentic casting, especially in big film and TV productions, discussion of non-Jewish actors being cast in roles, a lot of iconic roles. We had Catherine Hahn. There we can see Rachel Brosnahan, which I think everybody is shocked to find out she's not actually Jewish, but she plays a Jewish comedian in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. That's almost become a meme. I think that the shock when you find out Rachel is so good at portraying a certain look, but isn't actually Jewish. We have Helen Mirren, British actress with Russian ancestry, who is going to be playing Golda Meir, and Catherine Hahn, who was cast as Joan Rivers in a project that's now defunct, actually. So I'm just curious to know, this is such a fascinating debate over whether like Jews should be playing Jews or if this is something that's a bit more flexible. Who wants to touch this hot button question first? Well, Herschel, I want to point to you because you are, you are a performer.
Yeah, I can totally talk about it. I think it's it's something that people are really only talking about on a grand scale. It seems like in the past maybe like year, there was that Sarah Silverman podcast where she was talking about that, and I think that really hit home for me. And I think she was talking about the idea that a lot of Jews only get to play Jews if it's not about them being loved, or when they're not the central character. But she was pretty much saying this idea that when the Jewish character is the center, when they are messy and want to be loved and want acceptance, and they're kind of like the focus of the story, most often they are not played by a Jew. And I think that it is really important when there is a huge amount of Jewishness in the story, and that's the center, that we are looking to Jewish actors for those roles. And I do think it is a bit of a misstep when for generations and generations we have often seen a lot of these big Jewish roles not played by Jewish artists, and we don't necessarily put that same energy in different communities. So I do question that, and as an actor, it's something that connects with me in a really sensitive way. And yeah, I have probably more to say on it, but I'm actually really curious to hear everyone else's ideas on this.
Thanks, Herschel, for ceding the floor. It's a fascinating question. And I know Sarah's was controversially kind of, some people didn't agree with the word that she coined during that podcast you just referenced. Yael, do you have any thoughts on this?
It's wow. I really hadn't thought about it in that way. And now hearing Herschel speak, there is so much in our Jewish identity, in our Jewish culture, that influences the way that we live our lives, right? And a Jewish artist will be able to take, I'm laughing, but it's not funny. It's like the ancestral pain that's like literally comes through our generations, that to tell a story, I feel that if we're basing a character on somebody who is, like Golda Meir, it should be played by a Jewish artist. If it's a fictional character, I have less of an opinion, I would say. But if it's it should be somebody that's authentic. If we're portraying a real live, or some historical figure, it should be somebody from that. It's there was a lot of controversy about Cleopatra being portrayed by it was Gal Gadot, right? That was,
yes, that's right.
Right, I hear that. I hear that, but then on the other side, it's also, why are our historical figures not being portrayed by Jews? So
thank you.
Yeah, that would be my.
J-Rob, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I also, I guess, really like what Herschel said. I had never thought of it, but I now I do think of the Jewish characters that I have seen on screen. It's either their Judaism has it's a kind of like a joke, or it's a tragedy. We very rarely get a very full fleshed out and fully embodied Jewish person. I think I think it's no secret that there is no lack of Jewish representation in Hollywood. So the idea that we can't find a Jewish person to play a Jewish person is that's wild. It kind of tells me that maybe you're looking to not do that. I feel like it's a easy bullet to dodge, but it seems like there's for whatever reason an active effort to go the other direction. But I think Yael said, to offer authenticity to the role and to the story, you got to go with what's authentic. So I think it shouldn't be an issue is the thing. It's you can just do this, but I don't know.
Daph, I wanted to see if you wanted to have the last word on this. We have two great commenter questions to get to. Did you want to say, but before that, did you want to say anything about the representation question?
I don't know that I have like much more to add than other folks have said already. I also feel like a little out of my element with this one, just because I'm like notoriously horrible at keeping up with pop culture. Like if my friends group, everyone just knows I'm not gonna know what's up. I think for me, what I appreciate in this conversation is like the questions it brings up. Like really what Herschel was saying, like why aren't you casting Jewish people? I don't think like only Jews can play Jews. Like that's not really like where I go with this, but I'm like, oh yeah, I like was appreciating Sarah Silverman's questioning, like why, like what are the narratives that you feel comfortable casting Jewish people in? What is going on here? I think there are like some really important questions. So
I'll just add on. Sorry, I don't want to talk. Oh, I think there's also like a lot of internalized stuff too, even from Jewish creators, like these Jewish like heads of studios historically, or Jewish people in positions of power. There's sometimes this self-internalized kind of like hate, like, oh, like maybe we should cast this non-Jewish person as a Jew because it's going to look better, it's going to feel better, let's not go that route. And I heard that, I was in my first year of theater school, we went to a production of Fiddler on the Roof, and the team behind it was telling us that, yeah, we didn't really want to cast Jewish actors to play Jews because of preconceived notions, they might bring this. And this was in 2013. And I'm like, holy, like that is really, it's messed up, because it's this idea that like some Jewish actor who's, born over 100 years after this story somehow has like these preconceived issues that they're going to bring into the room. But it's no, they just have the background and history to serve the story even better. So I think there is a lot of like internalized stuff that we have to work through on our own when these conversations come up as well.
Yeah, a certain dismissiveness maybe that we don't really register. And I like what you said, Daph, about raising interesting questions. It's like that if we're going to stereotype at all, it's one thing that Jews are known for is raising questions and debating things. So that question is not going anywhere. And I thank you for your contributions on that. But we have two interesting questions to get to as we reach the top of the hour. So I'm going to ask our panelists if you want to tackle these questions, to keep them short. I'll throw it open to anyone who wants to jump on it. Aura asks, how do you see your artistic work engaging with and informing the older Jewish community? Herschel, you mentioned interviewing older queer members of the community for your research for something you've done. Is that a question that any of you wrestle with, engaging and working with the older members of the Jewish community?
For me, historically, I guess what's always followed me saying that I'm Jewish was a question, and that question being, are you really Jewish, or who in your family is Jewish? So I feel like me, hopefully, embodying my Jewishness and my entire identity, because I'm all of these things at once. I'm Black, I'm Jewish, I'm queer, I'm all of these things at once. If you're not seeing one of those things, then you're not seeing me at all. So for me, I hope that I can have that question be avoided in the future, and I hope open all people, old, young, whoever it may be, their minds up to understanding that not all Jews look alike. I'm a Black Ashkenazi Jew. You can't take that from me, and I hope you can, open yourself up to understand that, as the world grows and as we do, there's going to be a lot more Jews that look like me. There's going to be a lot more Jews that don't look like you, and that's okay. I think like it's a beautiful thing, and I hope to evoke the beauty in that, and help people see the beauty in that.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to engage with that question?
Yeah, I can engage a little bit. I think it's just everyone's experience is so different. Like I'm hearing what you say, J. Rob, because it's again so different. Because like my name is Herschel Yehuda Blatt. I look the way I look, so there is privilege in that experience. Because when I walk in the space, no one's ever like, "Are you Jewish?" It's like there's almost like you have perceptions about the kind of Jew that I am because of my name and all that stuff. And I think it's so interesting, especially when we're interacting with older communities, because often there's a generational divide with experience and terminology. And I think it's important to, be respectful to our older generations, but also question the things that pose as, points of contention, and kind of as Jewish artists, as Jewish people, be open to those conversations and, keep that curiosity up and really ask those hard questions and really interact in a grand way with older generations. And that's something I've been able to do with working with older kind of LGBTQ plus identifying Jewish seniors, and getting into some of those muddy, tough conversations and seeing where they go and how that influences my journey and my work.
Thank you. Our final question was from Richard joining us on Facebook. We touched on this a little bit, COVID and how that changes your work and what inspires you. Has COVID changed your views on the importance of intergenerational history and stories? Have families taken on more of an importance perhaps in your work? I don't remember who, but someone spoke a little bit about pandemic changing perhaps your artistry or what you were looking at. And I'm not sure who said that. Would anyone like to tackle that? Daph, go ahead.
Yeah, I was speaking about it just because it was just interesting to hear that Herschel and Yael, you also did this like artistic journey with the Segal through the pandemic, and just, what that experience was like. I'm not sure that, certainly like, COVID has raised so many questions for us, but I wouldn't say that COVID has made me think about families like in a different way, just because like I grew up extremely close with my grandparents, and so that was always a huge part of my life, those stories. And I feel like I really carry them, like almost physically. Sometimes I carry my ancestors' stories, and I think COVID just kind of brought a new dimension of, I think it opened grief portals for a lot of people, like time kind of stopping in this way and giving us a moment to pause. And certainly there was so much going on, but it does seem like something kind of shifted communally to say like, wow, what are our priorities? What are the things that like I'm holding on to that are important to me, or what have I not given enough time to? So I think that is kind of the piece of it that really stuck with me. Like, I do have time right now to wrestle with these questions and with ancestry, and lots of questions around what did I receive from them, what did I not. So I was really grateful for the time to do that.
Thank you, Richard, for that really interesting question. The final thing that I want to leave us on, since we've got so much time to be at home nowadays, obviously Pandemish is going to be on our top to-do list once it comes out on the 27th. But what is one Jewish artist that you think everyone should know, or a Jewish creation, any medium, any format? I want to hear your quick suggestions. Herschel had like the perfect thinking face there. You were like doing this. Who'd like to go first?
David Diggs. He's a actor, musician, screenwriter. He does it all. He's a modern day Renaissance man. I imagine most of you know him from Hamilton. He played, I think, one of the main. I never got to see Hamilton, unfortunately, but he's a Black Jew. Yes,
and Jefferson. Yeah.
Yes, a Black Jewish man and amazing person. Kills everything that he does, and check him out.
And you probably heard him in the last month with his rendition of "I Want a Puppy for Hanukkah," which is needs instant classic for Hanukkah songs. Great suggestion, J. Rob. Yael, is there anyone at the top of your recommendation list?
I'm gonna go classic Israeli, Arik Einstein. It's like my good old 70s music. And
perfect.
Classic.
Thank you. Daph, do you want to share a coup de coeur favorite for you?
Yeah. Oh, there are so many. I don't know how to choose, but I did want to shout out Jess Goldman, actually another a queer artist doing really amazing work queering Yiddish stories and biblical stories too. And she just put out a zine called Schmutz, and her work is really, really exciting to me. So wanted to shout her out.
Wow, I love the name of that of the magazine title, Schmutz. Herschel.
Yeah, there's also a lot. But I'll just go with Joey Soloway, because I think that's something in the past few years they've really inspired me with the work that they have done. And it's also inspired a lot of my own writing. And I think just, exploring that queer Jewish identity, and something that Daph was saying earlier about how when you can see yourself in a story and say, that's mine too. And I think that's something in Joey Soloway's work that I've been able to see. And that's just, like one, artist, showrunner, creator, writer, and this, really established person that I look up to in a lot of ways and can't wait to see what they do next.
And I think Transparent is the maybe best known of their works, but they've worked on many other projects as well. So we have Jess Goldman, David Diggs, Joey Soloway, and Yael, sorry, I didn't catch the name of the Israeli singer you were recommending. From the 70s, you said?
Yeah, Alec Einstein. It's like if you want to hear like really, really good Israeli music, like that is, it's what my mom raised me on, and it definitely influenced a lot of my musical taste moving forward.
All right. Well, we've got recommendations for things to listen to, people to listen to watch, and to read. And the four of you have also left us with so much food for thought. So a very big thank you to all of our panelists today, J. Rob, Yael Silver, Herschel Blatt, and Daph Ben David. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And also a thank you to Gabriela Saltil, Leora Friedland, Lisa Rubin, and the team at the Segal Center for bringing us here today, making all of this magic on the internet possible. And thank you at home for taking the time to join us. A big thank you to Richard, Aura, and everyone else who took the time to comment and ask us questions. YidLife Crisis Pandemish will be streaming online beginning this Thursday until the 31st of January. You can reserve your spot online at segalcenter.org. And before we go, I'll just mention that I will also be hosting another event online this coming Wednesday, January 26th, with the Museum of Jewish Montreal, which we've been referencing throughout the morning here. I'm launching a new podcast called Chrismukkah Party, and it's about interfaith celebrations. It's going to be on Zoom, so you can join in from home. museemarialjuif.ca if you'd like to join me on Wednesday. So enjoy Pandemish. Sunday at the Segal will be back next month. Be well and safe.